Hello, folks. Welcome back to World War II TV and the second of a double bill today. And earlier we looked at one day of the Arnhem story with Al Murray. And now the focus shifts to one group of participants. George Hoad is a member of Al Murray and James Holland's We Have Ways independent company. And we are delighted he's here to join us. He gave this same presentation, or a more formal version of it, at We Have Ways back in July. So I'll bring him in now. Good evening, James. George, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good, thank you.
I nearly called you James there. That was a bizarre kind of thinking of James Holland there, because you're like the James Holland of the future. You're like a clone, a mini me, James Holland for the future. So we were just chatting there. I mean, about the long-term legacy of the Battle of Market Garden, but it's not something necessarily that someone like yourself grew up with in the same way that me and James and Al did, because we grew up in the comics and the Airfix kits. I mean, there's a little bit of that now, but when were you first aware of Market Garden as a battle, as part of World War II?
Well, I'm struggling to remember myself, but I think it was a combination similarly of Airfix and A Bridge Too Far.
Yeah.
But I was always, as a kid, an Airfix. I used to get the infantry all pre-made, and I think that there was amazing artwork of on parachute infantry for the infantry on the box, and it was a man in a red beret screaming whilst he points across a bridge, and I think that's the one image that's stuck in my mind, along with Bridge Too Far coming on, and just always loving the scene where German half tracks are going across the bridge and John Frost is like mowing down saying wait for it and so on. But I think that it is, weirdly from my perspective, that, and then grown through stuff like video games for me now. And
yeah, that's the thing these days. And as you say, Bridge Too Far seems to be on ITV3 or 4, almost on Channel 5 all the time, on a loop all the anyway. But you know, you mentioned that about the bridge there, and that came up in the discussion with Al, is that has been a lot of the focus has been on that incredible action of Frost's men at the bridge, you know, with the German counterattack across the bridge there. But actually, there's a whole lot more. You know, Al breaks it down to the woods, the village, the town, and the bridge there. And your action kind of covers areas away from the bridge. But we'll bring it up now. So why this unit? Before we bring the slides up, why focus on the Royal Sussex and the 10th Parachute Battalion?
Well, when I was originally coming to the idea of, okay, I want to commit myself, I need to find a research, something to learn about in the Second World War. I can't just be a broad brush on the whole thing, maybe an expert subject on something. And so I was like, okay, I need a connection. Looked at the Royal Sussex Regiment, because I remembered, I think it's disbanded in 55, so it must be in World War II. Looked at the Sussex Regiment, 1st Battalion. I was reading about it. It turns into the Indian Army, and it's fighting with Sir Francis Tucker, Italy, Ethiopia, Monte Cassino, all this stuff. And then I thought, okay, maybe that's a bit more challenging to get information on, being in the Indian Army. What about 2nd Battalion? 2nd Battalion comes up. I'm reading about it. Battle of France 1940, and I see that fateful name, Arnhem, and I was just sort of like, right, perfect. This is now what I can start to research on. And then I started to go, well, there's been so much on Arnhem. How can I specialize on it? Well, doing it just about the battalion was my calculation almost. If I could focus on 10 para, then I could maybe provide a bit more of an insight. Because 10 para has no war diaries from the Battle of Arnhem, or they have war diaries, but they're very trimmed down to what they should be, and I'll get onto how we know about them later on.
Brilliant stuff. And I mean, and that remind as well that airborne battalions came from as many different backgrounds as like tank regiment, but you know, some were converted cavalry, some were just all volunteers thrust together, some had this sort of territorial existing infantry role that were then converted to airborne. There's no such thing as a standard way to create a British parachute battalion in World War II, but this route is one of them. So we'll bring up the slides. Folks, we're going to keep this kind of nice and informal and chatty and stuff like that. So I'm going to hand over to George to take us through this. And over to you, young man.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, 10th Parachute Battalion, Royal Sussex Regiment. they start off around 1942. They are transferred in Egypt into a parachute battalion, and then they suck up more volunteers from different regiments. So, but the vast majority of the Sussex Regiment stays. And then here's the infamous man himself, Shan Hackett, Brigadier Hackett, incredibly intelligent, incredibly brave, but of course, as we will find out, has a howler in Market Garden. And you can see he's with Montgomery. What I like about the photo, seeing him wearing an airborne beret, always switching up the appearance. And then you've got Urquhart on his right there, or his left, our right on the image.
Yeah.
And then here's the man who seems to be the core of the battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Smith. He's dragged almost by his heels into the battalion, and then as soon as he's put in it, the battalion becomes him, and he becomes the battalion. He drills them properly, and he gets them into a good shape. And they miss out on Sicily with 1st Airborne Division because one common thing it seems to be with 10 Para, they never have enough planes for 10 Para and 4th Parachute Brigade. So that's why they miss out on Sicily. And so they're used in Operation Slapstick instead. They're used to invade at Taranto, and they come into very little resistance in the port of Taranto. It was more, they had a little bit of a gunfight with some port authorities, but it'd all been deals done with the Italians. But they go in on boats, so it's a very ironic process for them. Then as they're disembarking, their transport ship carrying a lot of the medical equipment and their jeeps is hit by a sea mine, and that's the main loss of life during Operation Slapstick. There's very few men that die in actual combat for the British. It's more this sea mine. And this has the weird reverse effect of not only losing lots of men from 4th Parachute Brigade, but you lose all your Willys jeeps with it. And so there's a bizarre scene where 10 Para give Italian locals receipts, and they bundle themselves into Maseratis and Fiats and little Italian trucks and start bundling off to the town of Castellanta. And this is Castellanta, and when you first see it, you can clearly see it's almost opposite of Arnhem. It's cliffs, it's rocks, it's all a bit dry and dirty. It's an old medieval town, not a newish modernized town like Oosterbeek. And again, this is the terrain, and they end up fighting a Fallschirmjäger group of Fallschirmjägers around Castellanta. And again, they're fighting Fallschirmjägers. This is the opposite of what they would come up against in Arnhem with the SS and the Panzers. The Fallschirmjägers are probably a bit more of a fair fight in this terrain, a bit more easier for infantry to move, but you're not going to be able to get Panzers through that valley, or you could, but at a very, very slow pace. So it's all a bit more slowed down fighting, prime terrain for infantry, and they're pushing through slowly but surely, and they do well at Castellanta. And here's the current Major General at the time of Slapstick, Major General George Hopkinson. He, of course, Urquhart takes his knack after him of the idea of you go forward and to find out what's going on. If you can't find out what's going on, you keep going forward. And Hopkinson goes forward, and he's shot by a German machine gun whilst he's observing 10 Para's movements. And then this leads to Urquhart getting the job, more importantly, which becomes very important.
Interesting that he's got the original, I'm being a detail on the badge, the original parachute bulb-shaped badge on his sleeve there before they'd invented the wings that come later on. But yeah, interesting stuff. And yeah, he's got the glider pilot wings as well, isn't he?
Yeah. He's he's more of the type that's suited to Hackett and the Brigadiers, because they've almost been together from the start. And so, of course, when Urquhart comes in, there's a bit more tension. And here's just what I like to label as the steel, not flesh part of the Paras. The idea that they can get this artillery, this not very powerful, but still a 75mm gun. It can lob shells at a decent range and provide that quick support that a Fallschirmjäger division might not be able to do. The fact that they've got this is a massive help, and this is at the time of Slapstick.
Mm.
And during Slapstick, this man comes about, and this is Lionel Quirrell, and he shows great bravery during Slapstick. He's running down the dusty streets, he's jumping into water troughs, he's fully getting involved in the operation. And then they head back to England, and they miss out on D-Day, as famously known. 1st Airborne don't get their position, and of course this leads to some frustration in the men. But here you can see them as Lieutenant Colonel Smythe, and you've got the King there and Hackett, and so this is a big cheese meeting going on here. Here's some, this isn't 10 para, but this is sort of what they're doing. They're training in England constantly, going about their duties, constant exercises, and in part this is sort of good because you'd hope that that trains them to a very high standard, but at the same time it also is making them more frustrated. That if you're para, you're thinking, I'm just want to shoot some Germans at this point. You're not wanting.
Yeah, it kind of came up with Al that the creation of the mindset of the paratrooper. You know, you said it about the always pushing on. That's kind of coming down, top down from the leadership, and yet you've got to have more than just that. You know, that you can't just kind of go into the army and think you're going to go be a playground bully and just charge your way forward. You've got to have some plan, and it's fair to it's a possible comment that during that summer when all these because it's not like they weren't hearing about operations, they were hearing about things that then promptly got cancelled. We're going on Thursday, oh no we're not. We're going on Tuesday, oh no we're not. So a very frustrating time that summer there. And the creation of the 1st Allied Airborne Army, which we will be having a panel discussion about at some point in the channel, where I can get my 3 guests together in the same time. Once you've got that, that's going to be used. So everyone knows they are going to be going in somewhere. And at this point, they just want to go anywhere. I mean, I think if you were to speak to a para in 1st Airborne Division in late August 44, they'd have been willing to jump anywhere, anytime. They just want to go and kill Germans.
Yeah. And they've got almost a bit more high-tech kit at the time as well compared to regular infantrymen. So they're almost thinking, we've got all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've got all this stuff. How can we use it? And so, and I think also in 4th Parachute Brigade, there's a mutiny. I think 156 Battalion. I'm not sure on that, but there is a mutiny, and it all gets a bit messy during this brief period. But also during the exercises, these 2 men come up quite a lot in details on the war diaries. The man on the left is Lance Corporal Garibaldi, a Brighton boy. He shows great bravery at Arnhem, which we'll get into later. And the man on the right is Private Albert Etheridge, and they will both come up later on, which I think, and I mean, you can look at them. These are a bit more your regular paras, less than Smythe or Quirrell, who have been to Sandhurst and so on. And then it's always important to address this. This is Operation Market Garden, this big plan to end the war before Christmas, sweeping moves, one highway, all been done before, but just having a look at the plan and sort of it's all big stretched out in the whole idea. But this is what Arnhem, he's a bit more closer to Arnhem and less so what it's like for 10 para. But this is more the bridge area, but you can see in that top left, that's sort of the woods, that's sort of these constant rows of houses which they'll end up fighting through, similar to the forest, constant rows of trees. And so it's very good to see stuff like this, and you've got the railway bridge there and so on. And then here's it more on an operational level. So 10 para are planned to drop in on the 2nd day of the battle on the Monday, and they will drop at drop zone Y, and then they will move north, sweeping maneuver down the Amsterdamsweg, which is the road above or just along the tip of drop zone Y that heads into the centre of Arnhem, along there, and then end up on the north of Arnhem, get liberated, job's good. Of course, this is not really, and important to stress, I think, to realise where the Hartenstein Hotel is in this picture. It's just above the AL in 1st Air Landing Brigade. near that crossroads area. But always good to know your enemy. And here you got Wilhelm Bittrick and Sylvester Stadler. They are very nasty pieces of work. I mean, look at Sylvester Stadler on the right. I mean, he's got all the traits of your evil SS villain. You've got the skull, you've got the lightning bolts. They both served on the Eastern Front. They both committed war crimes. They're the whole package for your evil Nazi, really. And so it's going to be a tough fight. Less so that they're trained well, and more about the fanatical nature of the SS.
Yeah.
And I think, again, good to have a look at. This is the British Army parachute section for the average rifles. So you've got 10 men, but instead of having 6 rifles, which you would normally have in the rifle group, you have 4 rifles, a sniper, and a mortarman. And this is also a bit of an example of steel, not flesh. You've got the 2-inch mortar, which is very quick fire support if you need it. You've got the sniper rifle for precision over long ranges. And this is something that is very different to the regular army infantry section, who are a bit more bland in terms of your section 2 IC in your regular army doesn't get a Sten gun. There's a bit more automatic firepower in this. It's a bit more punch, a bit more close range, which the powers are expected to have to fight. But they set off, and on the 19th of September, 18th, sorry, getting the dates wrong. They set off for Arnhem to drop over drop zone Y. And you can see in this image, you've got a very mixed emotions. You've got people just chatting, people thinking that this could be the last ever photo taken of them. Others are just trying to focus, think about what they're going to do when they hit the ground. And then a gentleman third in on the right who's looking a bit like he feels sick there. Just proper like mix of emotions around here. And they land on drop zone Y. It's a fairly successful landing, although when the C-47s are going over, some are shot down, but there's men leaning out of the planes and they can see there's a pitched battle going on the drop zone. And KOSB Battalion have to clear the drop zone with a bayonet charge and almost save the day for the incoming second lift, which has been this part of the plan. And of course, there's problems with the plan of leaving men behind. But for 10 Para, it's relatively good drop. I think the Padre breaks his legs. Very few bad injuries. Most of them come from instant fighting quickly after.
Just worth considering for those who like the idea of a daytime jump and like the idea of having a big overview, is that concentration of paratroopers in one place is what you didn't get in Normandy. They ended up getting together in the same place, but they were scattered over miles and miles. But you can see in just that, I don't know how someone's there, Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man could count exactly how many parachutes there are in that photo, but that, it's dozens and dozens. So you do get that immediate theoretical concentration of fighting power in one place. But at the danger, of course, is the flak and getting there, the daytime there, and of course the big perennial debate in my garden is the distance from there to the town and the objectives. But we'll get to that, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, the element of surprise is lost for the Germans at this point. They now have had one drop coming on the day before, and so now they see a bunch of new paratroopers coming in. They're not taken by surprise, so they can now open fire on them. Of course, there's no war crime about shooting paratroopers back then. It's just complete free-for-all at this point. And this is a bit more, this is what the gliders are looking like, of course, crashing into the ground, all the paratroops in the sky, the C-47s. I mean, you can imagine the sound. You've got the famous thing in A Bridge Too Far is that scene when they land and he's got the fox hunting trumpet and you've got the C-4, and it's all a bit like that for 10 Para. I think it's important to realize that when talking about 10 Para, I will probably refer to their days as fighting and not the whole battle. So if I say their first day of fighting, I mean the second of the whole battle. It will get a bit confusing, but
thanks for clarification. I'll try and keep up at my elderly age, but
and this is again a little bit more sort of the feeling of it. apparently there's instant combat when they hit the ground. Some say that they meet up quite well, others say that they instantly into fighting, but they help KOSB Battalion clear the drop zone and finish the fighting around there. And the majority of fighting on the first day is just trying to get out of the drop zone, trying to get out of that square, that little pocket almost that they're stuck in. And so it is a bit of a tough fight for them on the first day. On the evening of the Monday, or the first day of fighting for them, Captain Quirrell takes command of A company. And then during the night, there's a George Cuthill, I think his name is, and it said he takes out a Tiger of a Piat, but knowing Allied soldiers, it could just be any Panzer that was
a tracked grey vehicle,
possibly, most likely with a big gun pointing it out at the end. And him and some other men, I think 5 other men, they come up to this Tiger in the night. There's like a little fire, and his mates go over and they stab the resting Panzer crew who are next to the tank, and he just fires the Piat at it. Now that it's like just a solid object. And on the same day of fighting, a bit earlier in the afternoon, Smythe is seen by Flight Sergeant Banwell, who was shot down earlier, went flying a C-47. Smythe, the battalion commander, is seen arguing with a German officer, with about 20 men with each of them, and then eventually them arguing, "No, you're our prisoner," and so on like that. And then they just stop the argument, turn around, and walk other ways. Now, it's in Arnhem's nature that could be true, but who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, I just remember before we move too much on from that first day, this battalion's first day is, and it was delayed. Their jumping was delayed a bit, but do we know anything about whether or not there had been any kind of updating of what the situation was before they go in? Obviously, the guys jumping on day one, on D-Day, are going in with a plan out of the box as intended. But by that second day, we now know with hindsight that the plan was already not unraveling, but well, I suppose it is unraveling, is it? But there's also the communications issue. Had there been any amendments, any suggestion to this battalion that things might not be as predicted on the ground?
No, not from what I've seen.
That's what I thought.
This will link into Hackett's decision on Black Tuesday.
Yeah.
And the fact that they only see this pitch battle on the drop zone as they're leaning out the aircraft.
Yeah.
And it's such a fierce battle when they get down there and they start to fight out, that as they're leaving the drop zone, the wooded area around the zone is on fire as they're leaving. And it's almost this pitch black night with this orange fire lighting up the drop zone in some strange way. There were a couple men who were in 10 power drop before to mark out the drop zone and help get everyone together, but they can't really report to Hackett, or they can't report to Quirrell, they can't report to Smythe. They are almost isolated. So in the drop, it's first thing, bit unexpected, but overall, the first day is good. So again, looking back at the map, so they've dropped at drop zone Y, they've fought out of that little fielded area, they're pushing along in between the Amsterdamsweg on the north and the railway line in the south. Their plan, of course, as I've said before, push in from the woods and get to their location north of Arnhem. And Hackett, wanting to prove himself desperately, is often just thinking, if we can smash through the woods in the north, if we can get 4th Parachute Brigade into the north of the town, we could hold out for long enough. It should be fine. We've been told this, and all the classic almost surprise for both sides in terms of the Germans don't know what's coming and the British don't know what's going to hit them. So at 3 a.m. on the morning of Black Tuesday, is now infamously called, 10 power move out. They are moving alongside the railroad, and as they're moving along, they hit heavy German resistance coming the other way. And the first indication of contact from the Germans on Black Tuesday is Smythe is leading the jeeps. He's driving his jeep. He gets on top of the railway, and he's shot at as, or not the railway, sorry, the road at Amsterdamsweg, and he's shot at as he comes out onto this road. And he quickly reverses, and they get some poor private to stick his head round the corner and see what's shooting down on them, and he gets his head blown off. And it's, as I've started to research and reading more books as you go along, Arnhem starts to turn from being a bridge too far, and this idea of plucky Brits walking through Dutch civilians, greeting them wherever they go, starts to turn from that idea of from bridge too far a little bit more into almost an all quiet on the Western Front feel of this. It's a horrible battle to be in. It's absolutely hell. There's mud everywhere. The trees are on fire. The houses are on fire. Rubble in the streets. Blown up jeeps and bits everywhere. Planes coming down. It's a horrific depiction of war. And that is something that strikes me especially now as you go into reading more about Arnhem. And this is the type of fighting on the first day as well. You can got 6-pounders quickly firing as Panzer IIIs and Stugs can't coming down towards them. Infamously, Urquhart goes missing, and Hackett then leaves 4th Parachute Brigade to head to the Hartenstein and has this argument. So he's not exactly with 4th Parachute Brigade when contact hits 10 para. And so it's not maybe the best choice. He makes a couple errors. First of all, going to the Hartenstein might probably be one when you're meant to be leading your brigade through the woods. You don't know what you're going to hit. Slight problems there. But, of course, going through the woods was an error in itself.
And just on your take, I mean, it's a massive, great rabbit hole that we could spend ages on. But on that failure of Urquhart's to leave in place a clear hierarchy of what would happen if he is out of the picture, because the one thing the Allies are really good at, theoretically, by 1944, is having that good command. Is that everyone knows where their responsibilities start and where they end, what they're in charge of. It, you know, the overlord planning goes kind of American, British, American, all the way down with the Canadians on the side there as well. And this is the kind of thing the Germans are guilty of, is with their Campen groups, no one knowing, is it the Ober so-and-so Führer in charge, is the Leutnant in charge, is that's a German trait of no one really knowing who's, but yet the Germans seem to manage to adapt quite well. But clearly to Al and I, that failure of Urquhart's to not have a clear command system had huge repercussions. I'm assuming you agree with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can question why Urquhart's going off with Lafbury and Mackenzie, or not Mackenzie, but going off with Lafbury on this almost strange intervention to try and get to the bridge. And how he theorizes to get back if he somehow gets to the bridge, God knows. But it's a bit of a strange decision, especially as Mackenzie is almost assistant type Batman, like bodyguard. He gives him the order of succession as he's getting into his hawser. And you think, what, why are you doing it now? This should probably have been said in a meeting when everyone's present and everyone can listen and make it and go, right, yes, sir. And
I mean, it was ridiculous in the middle of a battle that people are discussing when they became a brigadier, and I was, you know, it's like the scene in Zulu between Michael Caine and Stanley Baker when they got the commission. But that's essentially what's happening with the whole Hicks, Hackett, Lathbury. You know, who's senior. That could have just been settled by a clear understanding in advance of if I'm not there, says General Urquhart, this is how it goes. This person, this person, this person. That's the order. That's the and that is a clear failing. And you know, we discussed with Alan, I know you listened to some of it, but you were at school, is that Hackett is incredibly intelligent. I mean, he spoke 10 different languages, he traveled the globe, he knows he's intelligent, he knows he's sharp with other people, but he's kind of book smart, but maybe not street smart. Is that kind of how you might assess a Hackett?
Yeah, sort of. You can, in my opinion, you can do so many years at Sandhurst, read the books of Sun Tzu and Napoleon, but when you're truly tested as a leader, almost, that's when you can either shine or not shine. I'm
Yeah,
trying not
definitely.
to use that word, but anyway, back onto this. But
yeah, sorry, I derailed you with questions.
Then but looking at this is my favourite photo of Market Garden, and this is what it starts to become on Black Tuesday. They run into the pumping station on the other side of the Amsterdamsweg, and there's a bit of confusion because they see panzers. Then as they're marching back, the recce who've seen the panzers, they're marching back to the main component of the battalion, and then there's a German patrol that intercepts them, and it's all such chaos in this small moment of time. And then it ends up becoming, they pull back to, if we come back to here, they're roughly at this point now, after the incidents at the pumping station, just above landing zone L, and they've almost dug in these quick made foxholes, implanted themselves above landing zone L, and then so the Poles can come in with their gliders and so on. And there's this then bizarre decision where, even though they're dug in, and the line's a bit mixed, of course, because you're in one foxhole and then walking in between the next foxhole is a couple Germans, and there's a brutal hand-to-hand fighting. Despite all of this, Urquhart and Hackett come to a decision of, well, we should pull back across landing zone L and consolidate in the Oosterbeek perimeter. And you sort of think it's a good idea. However, when you're in an entrenched position, and Smythe makes this clear to Hackett, he's going, what are we doing? And Hackett goes like, we'll do whatever we're bloody well told, or something like that. And it's like, this is like a suicide. You're in an entrenched position, holding fairly well at this time, and you're being surrounded, yes, but you don't know when the pole gliders are coming, and they end up, of course, famously start crashing down into landing zone L as some of them are pulling back and some of them are still fighting. And there's the bizarre moment where the poles end up in between this fighting. And here's another one. I mean, these are some radio operators here with their Sten guns, but you can almost picture yourself. And if for anyone who was at We Have Ways Fest, the heat is like that first day, the Friday on We Have Ways. It's scorching hot, coming through the trees, the lights coming through the trees. You can hear armored vehicles roaming around in the distance, hear distant gunfire. The best way to picture that gunfire is if you listen to anything of Stanley Maxted during the operation. You can get it on Spotify, and he talks about on the 20th the landing of the supplies that they failed to get on Black Tuesday, which we'll come to in a bit. And in the background, it's like bang, 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 boom. You hear the big anti-air guns fire, you hear the Flak 88s, and then you hear the smaller Flak 36s. You can go, Jesus, this is like. But anyone couldn't picture themselves, I think, in that small little dugout, watching through the trees, hoping what doesn't come crashing through the trees is a Tiger or a Panzer, and is actually just maybe a lone German or some Dutch civilians, best off. But yeah, just some of the pictures, a lot of them are stills from footage of Arnhem, but some of the pictures are incredible from Black Tuesday.
Yeah, we have a great record, and it also mentioning, you showed the image of the weaponry breakdown with the Stens is on that first day. Just as you were talking about the battalion kind of fighting away at the woods, they're going to be not burning through ammunition willy-nilly, but they're going to be using it in that way, that because that's the airborne ethos is hit fast, hit hard, go fire, and then by what is for them the second day but third day of the operation overall is there's maybe the realization that actually support isn't coming in. We may get bundles dropped by the air, but hang fire a bit, Fred. We can't. You might not better use a full mag for this, maybe just a single shot, and you start to see that creeping in a bit, which is these incredibly well trained soldiers effectively fighting one arm tied behind their back because they can't use the tool that they've got because of the ammunition issue.
And they use up so much of that ammo on that first day for 10 power because they think Second Army and 30 Corps are going to come sweeping across that bridge anytime soon with light SP guns, 25-pounders, and they'll blast the German SS away, and they'll be fine for ammunition. But then this is like looking at the German perspective again. This is what they're doing. They're sort of moving along the walls of these forests, almost the corners of these fields. You've got them coming up behind tanks. You can see on the picture on the right, the Stugs wrecked on the road. And then we come back to Lance Corporal Garibaldi. Now, he's one of the very few people who is in charge of a Bren carrier at Arnhem. Is in charge of a Bren carrier at Arnhem. And, of course, those who don't know Bren carrier, example on the right here. But what he does during Black Tuesday is incredible. So he takes his Bren carrier and he drives them right up to the edge of German positions. And if his gunners like trying to get a hold of the gun, he'll just grab it and open fire. If not, the gunner will open fire. And he keeps doing this for the whole of Black Tuesday, and he survives Black Tuesday despite his complete crazy mentality of driving this little metal box that probably couldn't survive a 50 caliber bullet right up to the edge of these German positions. And then Private Albert Etheridge, he takes out 4 snipers and 2 machine gun positions on Black Tuesday and eventually dies later on. But there's just, as is Arnhem, there's just so much moments of heroics throughout 10 Para during the whole battle. And there's another private who, he's got a Bren gun, he's in the roof of this barn, and he holds the Germans off for about 5 minutes as his other mates, and he's got a bullet in one arm. And so a large majority of 10 Para are now starting to become wounded. And even Lieutenant Colonel Smythe, the battalion commander, he's got a bullet in his arm. He's not really doing great for himself. And so, as I said earlier, here's that 75mm gun in use there, just constant firing. And you want to put yourself in the position of a Para in that moment. If you're the loader on this gun, you're just constantly picking up a shell, loading it, closing the breech, open, the gunner fires, next one out, bang, down. It's just constant repetition in the sweltering heat. And like I said before, it's absolute hell for the men of 10 Para.
And if you keep lobbing shells through a gun like that, you're making yourself and your gun a massive, great target for the Germans, because the Germans are obviously going to try and direct fire at the big barrel thing that's causing all that damage. And so, staying in one place with an artillery piece fight like that, firing all the time, you're asking for everything the Germans have got directed at you very shortly.
And the Germans have got less so impact in 10 Para, but the Germans have got artillery on the other side, the southern side of the Rhine, lobbing mortars and shells into Oosterbeek, that area, which will become a problem for 10 Para later on in the battle. And as the battle keeps going on the Tuesday, the Germans, I mean, look at the Germans here. They've got whatever they could grab. They've put it on them. They've grabbed a rifle, grabbed the helmet, wrapped some bullets around them, and they've just gone, right, okay, let's go. And one of the things about Arnhem is the paratroopers are fighting an absolute hodgepodge of SS forces, Kriegsmarine. It's just a massive, it's whoever's in the area at the time. Some military police are involved. It's shove them in, is the German perspective.
But their remit is simple in the sense that they've just got to kill British paratroopers and glide guys. Yeah. Whereas the battalion have still got to always in the back of their mind, well, not in the forefront of their mind, is what is the objective? Are we advancing still? Are we falling back? Are we holding this position? Are we trying to link with the people to our right, to our left? They've always got those decisions, those on the ground tactical decisions to make, where the Germans don't have to. The Germans are like, they're like ratting. I'm not describing the British paras as rats, but they're just every rat that they see run in front of them, meaning a British paratrooper kill them. That's one less heading towards the bridge, because the Germans know that the bridge is obviously the ultimate goal. They know that's clearly what they're trying to get. They're trying to get across the Rhine. So in a sense, the fact that you're a Kriegsmarine guy, the fact you've got a rifle, and you're not trained, but your role is simple: get in there and kill British airborne soldiers. And as Al said, and you're aware as well, the Germans are just ruthless in their disregard for the lives of their own men. I mean, they don't give a shit how many of these guys die trying to kill paras, just as long as they are killing paras.
Yeah. And the Germans also have the aspect of they don't have to worry about if there's going to be more ammunition, because they're on the defense. In this, they go on the offense, but they're defending this territory that they think is rightfully theirs. And it's also because they're such fanatics, they'll just keep on fighting until they'll keep on crushing this resistance for as long as possible. And then this is where we're going to address the shortages. So bottom left, you've got man using his canteen, getting as much water down him, and water then starts to become an issue. By Black Tuesday, they're running out of water. The dirt's dry. The Dutch civilians are trying to give them any drink they can. And then top right, the mortar ammunition, as we've mentioned earlier, the paras are now running out of ammo because they've got this idea that Second Army will sweep through. We can use whatever we want. And the frustration of being kept out of these previous operations is exhausted throughout this opening fire, mowing down troops. It's just the idea that they can just keep on firing is so much more present for the paratroopers at Arnhem, and they think, oh, we're going to be the great liberators. So if we're going to liberate, we're going to just keep on firing because we'll be fine in the end of it. We're going to make our story known.
Yeah, everyone's talking about that famous photo, of course, and the fact that the barrel of the mortar is nearly vertical, meaning the Germans are just over the bloody hedge. And a lot of us have been to that location and consider just the proximity there, which is, it didn't come up with Alan, it's not coming up, is that the Allies by this point of the war, they're used to being able to call in reasonably successful close air support, but you can't in this environment because everybody's mixed up. The whole Arnhem from the town right back to the drop zones at Ginkleheath is everybody's mixed up. So, you know, even if there were taxi ranks of Typhoons flying over above or Spitfire, there's nothing they can do. They can maybe try and get German supplies coming in miles to the north, but there's nothing they can do of the battlefield. Your artillery from Second Army's way miles down a road that they're fighting way up. So all you've got is your own support, and that's, you know, you'll get the ammo now, but that this is when the shortages are going to start really causing problems.
And then, I mean, and in this image, you can see on the top and on the left-hand side, you've got bomb lines there. You've got there is prepared for 1st Airborne Division a close air support unit, but they just don't have the time to train with it. They don't have the resources. They don't fully understand how to use it, and so it's not really. And of course, the radios are a bit buggered by this point, so it's all going completely wrong. And Hackett's, of course, having his howler. It's a complete nightmare, and it gets from bad to worse with the supplies. And as I mentioned earlier, Stanley Maxted talks about on the 20th, but on the 19th, going back, we can see you got supply drop zone V near Lichtenbeek, just above Arnhem. The Germans hold that area, so it all just drops straight into their hands, and they're thinking, brilliant, here's millions of rounds for Lee Enfields. There's so much more they can now use. And then again, like around this day, people start ditching their original weapons, picking up whenever near them. So because 10 Power takes so many losses on this day, a lot of the men by this point have Sten guns. They're dropping the Lee Enfield and going, this Sten gun, I can put a bayonet on it still. I can open fire with it. It's perfect for me. It's not and everyone talks about the mad minute with the Lee Enfield, but you can't replicate, I feel, you can't replicate the power of not power, but the rate of fire from a semi-automatic machine gun or a Bren gun with a simple Lee Enfield. It's quite hard to do that consistently. And then here's a little picture that helps people understand what's going on. So 10 power, you can see with 156 and KOSB pulling back around to Wolfhazer, and 10 power on the 20th, they return at 1:30 to the Hartenstein with 60 out of 600 of the men from the original drop. They are completely destroyed, and Urquhart sees them and he describes them as like battered, exhausted, bloody, but still keeping their discipline. And that just shows you how determined they are just to keep fighting, because it'll all be okay. And you can see that dark blue line going. Now that is what will become the used to be perimeter very soon. Line of Quiriple around this time is seen crossing back and forth the railroad with a pipe, and he keeps on marching over and getting people back over and then walking back across. He's incredibly calm, and we'll get back to his amazing actions later on. So yeah, 20th comes around, and when they hit the Hartenstein, they then are told, right, okay, new objectives, lads. You're going to go take your 60 men, go out to these 4 houses on a crossroads and hold this crossroads for as long as you can. And it's about 7 houses distributed by 60 men. It's not ideal for them at all. And on the Thursday, so getting forward a little bit more here, on the Thursday, so next day, Smythe disappears from the majority of men, and a private sees Smythe and his Batman lying in the ground, and he presumes they're dead when in fact they're actually unconscious, and we'll get more to that here. But I just wanted to touch on these images because some of these pictures are incredible to me in terms of you compare these 2 glider pilots clearing this old schoolhouse. You compare that to something like Fallujah with the US Marines, or any modern day urban warfare, Basra for the British Army in Iraq. It's so similar. You just change the weaponry around, and it's almost the same.
And just we had the question earlier about what house to house fighting experience, Fibua in fighting in built up areas the battalion had prior to going to Arnhem, and I'm assuming the answer is basically none.
Barely any, no. It's more going down a street and there's a Spandau at the end of it, bursting bullets down, and it's not really house to house. It's like small bunkers and stuff, and as I showed earlier, the big like rolling valleys in Italy. And that's all the combat experience they've actually had for the paratroopers. But this image as well, this image is at Arnhem in Oosterbeek, but this could easily be Stalingrad. This could easily be Leningrad. This could be Mariupol. This could be, if you swap the uniforms around, this is Mariupol. This is Sevastopol. It is incredible how similar Arnhem becomes to the more brutal battles of the Second World War, but because the numbers are scaled down, it's got less of an effect on the life. But if this had been 30 Corps runs into Arnhem and meets the 9th SS division, the Hockenstaufen or something like that, it would have been appalling losses. Unthinkable the amount of dead you get from SS divisions running into 30 Corps and having to fight through Arnhem with all that's going on. And here's some more glider pilots from 4th Parachute Brigade, and you can see everyone's got a Sten gun there. I mean, except the man at the back who's got his 1911, but everyone's got a Sten at this point. No one's using the Lee Enfield as much as they would have been. The odd person's got a carbine. And a smaller detail that I discovered was you notice that the paras are all holding despite having a pistol grip at the front of their Sten Mark 5, they're all holding their Stens by the magazine, like you would with the old Sten Mark II, because of course that doesn't have your wooden pistol grip at the front. And so they just, at the end of the day, just went, all right, okay, we're going to hold it like this. It's what we're used to. It's what we're good at.
But there's also that theory that the magazine feeder lips on the Sten gun were prone to bending and jamming. So if you had your fingers around the magazine in the housing, you're keeping it more stable for reliability. There is that school of thought.
And I think
I don't know how accurate that is, but that there might also, it's maybe a habit, as you said, but it also may be a bit of logic that you're protecting the magazine.
And there's also, I think, the rumor that if you hold on to the wooden pistol grip at the front too much, it can end up wobbling and the screws could become loose.
Yeah, they break off very easily. Yeah.
And people, by the Thursday and Wednesday, there's starts to become this surrendering en masse trait. And I mean, look at the men on the right, look at them on the left. Their faces, they're dirty, they're grimy. The Denison smocks have become a bit more loosened. The shirts have become undone, and it is becoming a lot more brutal. But moving back to 10 Para, so 10 Para are told, hold this crossroad, and for the next 3 days, they hold this crossroad against mortaring, tanks, infantry. The Germans bring up big SP guns straight up to the doors and open fire. They try and burn them out. They use phosphorus, then they use flamethrowers to try and get 10 Para out of these houses. And this is where Smythe becomes unconscious, because Smythe is with his Batman, and with, I think, a Lance Corporal Rhodes or Ruff or something like that. And he's going, let's just end this. Why can't they stop the SP guns going off? And as they're saying this, someone goes, "Oh, they're saving us till last, sir." And at that moment, a burst of machine gun fire comes across the house. It knocks the Batman unconscious, and the Batman wakes up, and he's in the basement of a Dutch house, and he's being given cherry brandy by a German soldier who's going, "Listen, you fought really well. Well done on how hard you fought. You're some of the hardest soldiers we've ever fought. You deserve this bit of brandy." And Smythe is then chucked into an ambulance due to his wounds and is rushed off to the St. Elizabeth Hospital. And his Batman never sees him again. He's told, he dies of his wounds, but he never sees him again. And it's at this point that the Dutch civilians are starting to go, "You stay here, we'll look after you," and then trying to smuggle them back out. Lance Corporal Garibaldi from earlier, he's leading a convoy out of the Hartenstein. And as he's doing so, I think they make a wrong turn and he's shot up. And it's now all these, I hate to say it, but all these characters that we've now learnt about, similar to when I was researching it. I think, this is a great character. He's from Brighton, local boy to Sussex, does some amazing stuff. And you turn a couple pages and the next day, he's gone.
Yeah.
It's just atrocious, the fighting.
Do you think there's a mindset where they get the point, by this point, there's no hope of reinforcements arriving. It's standing and fighting now to the last round. Do you think that some of the men kind of start getting a fatalistic approach to things and kind of thinking, well, I'm going to die anyway, I might as well die, clearing one more building, trying to hold one more bit, trying to, do you think that creeps in a bit, and which combined with fatigue as well?
I think it is creeping in a little bit, but I do think the majority still think Second Army is going to turn up. There is still a little bit of belief, especially when in the final couple days of the battle, the radios make contact with, I think, Royal Artillery from the Second Army. And you sort of think, Second Army's here, they're on the other side of the river, and they can see each other. And then you have these bizarre attempts towards the ends of the battle where you're shoving like the Dorsets across the river in boats and ducks, or dropping in the poles. And it's all it's all just bizarre attempts where you sort of think they must be thinking when they go send the poles in, just go, they need reinforcements, they need supplies, send the poles in. They're the only paratroopers we've got readily on hand, ready to go. And so it's getting desperate for both sides.
We
for
covered
high
that on
command
Monday
and,
with Christopher Jarry talking about the Dorsets pushing the river, and they get a few hundred across and the casualties are terrible and it's not supported properly with artillery. It's not, they haven't really got an end plane in mind. It's all just, we'll go over there and try and help. It's all a little bit written on the back of a cigarette packet and thrown in the last minute because, the needs must. And you definitely see this desperation and kind of, as Al said in his book, futile gestures kind of being thrown into the mix of, we've got to try something.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to start to not come to an end, but focus more on a bit more of the individual stories, because the Batman of Smythe, he makes it out of this complex crossroads that they're defending, and he takes part in Operation Berlin, which is the attempt to cross the Rhine and escape, and he manages to escape. Smythe is paralyzed from the waist down during the combat, and Hackett, who's also been injured, goes under a disguise into the St. Elizabeth's Hospital. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. He goes in disguise into St. Elizabeth's, and Hackett hears that Smythe's in the building, and he goes, brilliant, because Hackett loves Smythe. He thinks he's a
have a drink. I'll talk for a bit while you have a drink. And as people are saying, amazing images, and putting him in, hearing your commentary while seeing the images is a real reminder of just the fraught nature of this. At this point it's starting to get desperate, and these are so harrowing, these images. Amazing stuff. And folks, by the way, thank you for your support. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. If you haven't caught Al Murray's show, go ahead and see that one later. And we've got another show tomorrow. We're looking at the traitor of Arnhem, the theory that there were spies from the part of the Cambridge, Anthony Blunt, those guys who were actually feeding information to the Russians that was getting to the Germans. So we're covering that tomorrow. And then that's kind of our immediate coverage of Arnhem kind of over, though we will be retouching it later on. But good. You're back, George.
Yeah, sorry. I just apologies for that. Didn't realize how much water I'd need. But so Hackett finds out that in St. Elizabeth Hospital, Smythe's there, and he goes, "Oh, I'm not a lance corporal. Sorry, I'm a major." And so the Germans go, "Okay, fine. We'll upgrade you into the officer area." And he finds Smythe, and Hackett doesn't really know what it's been for 10 Power. So he spends his last hours, Hackett spends sitting down with Smythe and noting down what 10 Power have been through. And it's this incredible story of they've been separated. Hackett left to go and take command and left almost Smythe to deal with his own problems. But they're reunited at the end. And there's almost this lovely reunion type thing of Smythe in his last moments is able to tell his story of what he thinks happened, and Hackett gets it down, and that's what Hackett's battle knowledge mostly is from his perspective. And he says there's no braver man than Lieutenant Colonel Kenneth Smythe than I've ever met. And then we'll come to the end of Arnhem. Stragglers from 10 Power making their way back to the Hartenstein. The sheer desperation really comes through in these photos. The holes in the walls, the shell craters in the windows. A man with his carbine, most likely quite a young role, maybe just a signals man or some just writing in the offices, ends up having to take part in this last minute stand for the Hartenstein. And then we come back to Lionel Kirple, who gets a VC for his actions on Black Tuesday. And his actions include incredible moments where he's in charge of A Company, which at this point in the battle on Black Tuesday is just a hodgepodge of men from all different battalions. And he takes this machine gun position that's been captured from Powers earlier in that day. He retakes the 6-pounders and machine guns. He uses them against the Germans. And then later on in the day, he's on the retreat, and he's in a foxhole with 5 other men. And they're using their pistols and their grenades as last-minute resorts. And he goes, listen, guys, go. I'll stay here. I'll stay here. I'll defend to the last man. You guys go. And he's never seen from that point on. And he posthumously, rightfully receives his VC, I think.
And I've always wondered why, of the 5 VCs there, his isn't better. And I think David Lord's, and it seems to be maybe the best well-known, Kane's as well. But for my money, this is the most, I mean, they're all outstanding, but this is the one that when I was on location for the first time I went to Arnhem, wherever the hell it was, before you were born, it was a story that made that then I had hairs on the back of my neck then stand up on end. That, the fact that, no one quite knows what the final fate of his fate was.
Yeah. And I think his story is partly less well known because he's in the woods.
Yeah.
He's not at the bridge. If he's at the bridge, it's a completely different story. In terms of he's more well known, he's resounded. But thankfully, he got his justice because I think he recently appeared in a BBC News article.
Yeah.
But it's just an incredible story. And to finish up,
I mean, I'm glad that you and Al have particularly covered the fighting in the woods, because I mean, if you're doing the whole battle, it does seem to be a shorter battle there. But as you've made it clear and Al made it clear, really pivotal to the overview and Hackett's decisions or single decision to carry on with the original plan and looping around the north, probably not the right one. And Lathbury had made the earlier the error on the first day by splitting the column into 3 and the 3 routes. But there's lots more to dissect about what went wrong at the brigade command level. But when it comes down to someone like, the Victoria Cross actions of Quirrell, it's a reminder of just where the level of personal bravery that was going on.
Yeah. And I think just to end up on 10 power, they're virtually annihilated in the battle. I think 1 or 2 come out unharmed. But so due to this, in October they're disbanded, and they end up and then they reform later in the war, and they draw in members from other battalions. But it's just remarkable how tragic and remarkable their story is, and how many brave stories there are individually. And I think there's so much that can be learned from 10 Para that not even I have dug up. So much more individual movements and what the companies are doing and what each man thinks genuinely. And there's so many more stories I couldn't fit into the talk.
It just gives us a reason to bring you back on a future occasion to highlight some of the brave actions there. But I mean, you were worried. We were chatting on Facebook. So my talk's only 30 minutes, but we've done an hour with me interjecting and a few comments from the viewers. The biggest question from the viewers is Mad Cat summing it up. Would George talk about how he researched this subject? What was your process? Because I mean, we've noticed that you're a little bit younger than some of us. So digitally, I am assuming is a lot of the way online. But what was your process to put this story together?
Digitally was the main thing, as you said, to the Pegasus archives.
Yeah.
The Paradata organization, who do an amazing job in both my research in Arnhem and my future project coming up. And then it does get a bit more physical in terms of going to the Sussex National Archives and going there and reading different things, different parole duties, and seeing what's been crossed out and so on. And then I think the most amazing one for me personally was going to the National Archives for my first ever time, going in and holding like Second Army's summary of that infamous, and reading the infamous line, the operation can be concluded 90% successful, and
whatever the hell that means.
yeah. And just, to me, I was like, right, this is now, I feel like I'm doing proper like history work now, not watching an animated video online about something. I feel like I'm doing something now.
Well, I mean, actually, you can go back and read the live chat again later on. The compliments about your proficiency, your expertise, just the knowledge you put into this is outstanding. But you're not resting on your laurels. I mean, your next project, it's sort of out of the scope of World War II TV. But when I saw you announce, I forget whether I saw it on Twitter or Facebook, but crazy exciting. So, what are you working on?
So, it all came out because James Holland said, "Oh, we're interested in you maybe coming back for We Have Ways Fest. What would you be interested in talking about?" And I was like, "I've got lots of ideas," and I eventually came to the conclusion of 3 different topics, all with varying different areas. So the first topic was battles of San Marino and Rimini in the Gothic Line and Operation Olive, and I have a bit more of a local connection to that. I've been there quite a lot of times, the area, and so I thought that would be brilliant to be able to go walk in the ground. I can keep parents happy by having them enjoy a very nice holiday in Italy. I can also then go to San Marino and look at the different things. And then as I started researching that, I was like, it seems a tremendous task to start researching San Marino and Rimini, because a lot of the battle was fought by the Greeks. And so I emailed different people saying, "Oh, how would I get hold of this?" And they were like, "You might have to go to Athens, learn Greek, and end up reading from there." And so I sort of went, I'm going to bin that off. And then I came to the conclusion of these 2. The one I would eventually pick, Operation Musketeer, Suez Canal, 1956. Amazing topic, I think, because got men using the same weaponry that their generation before them is. So the men who fought in the Second World War, there's very few who take on Musketeer, and then the other one was that I could potentially tell them was Operation Martyrdom, which is 1945-46. The British Army takes over command of Vietnam for a very brief period of time before the French come back in, but they fight the Viet Minh with the Indian Army, the Gurkhas, and they end up, in a bizarre twist, winning against the Viet Minh for once, for various reasons. But they used the Japanese army to do some of the fighting, the POWs, and that was an amazing story. But then when I started researching that, I was like, there isn't enough like easy access like sources to get to. Compared to Musketeer and Suez, most of them's got 3 documents in the National Archives on a quick search. Musketeer's got like 345.
Wow.
All different things, from the notes from Anthony Eden's meetings, the reconnaissance photos, the plans of... And I guess a part of me picking Musketeer is that little bit of an attachment I've got to that parachute regiment now that I've studied Arnhem.
Yeah.
To start looking into them a little bit more, because they are used again. But hopefully that'll go as well. And
I mean, hats off to you for taking it on, because most people in the sidebar will have heard of the Suez crisis in 1956 and will be aware of it more from the political ramifications and Anthony Eden and all that there. But there was action on the ground, and I think what I know about it, I could literally write on the back of a postage stamp. I mean, it's but you're taking that forward and looking at, and that as Al learned via his father Ingram, that progression of the airborne theory into the 50s and 60s, when you start bringing in helicopters and the air landing becomes a different kind of beast, and yet the core principle of getting fast with small arms stuff doesn't change. They're still kind of got Sten guns and number 4s and Denisons, and so really fascinating era to look at, because then I think the parachute regiment were only not involved in combat 1 year in the 20th century or something, correct? Well, after World War II. But you kind of leap forward to the Falklands before most people have a kind of a depth of knowledge again. But that 50s period is really fascinating. So yeah, can't wait to hear about that.
And it's all 48 hours of combat. That's all it is. But it's so similar to D-Day in terms of you have your powers on your flanks, then you're going to have the Royal Marines land, and of course this is probably not suited for now after an Arnhem talk, but it's all so interesting and such more. It gives you an idea of what the British Army will end up doing in the 90s and the 2000s. Yeah. You can already see the combat in the Middle East sort of strategies and eventually Northern Ireland with insurgencies. And all these sort of, you can slowly see the tactics of World War II and the tactics of the future coming together as this bizarre combination, which militarily is seen as a success, but it, in my opinion, isn't a massive success. It's actually a failure in planning. I won't get into it now.
No, but, I mean, we're just waiting for the release of the project. I mean, the thing is, we might all be dead by the time we finished it because we're all old and we're clinging on to life. But no, I mean, we will bring things in. George, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. The double bill of you and Al today has been an outstanding contribution to our understanding of the nature and the personal stories from this Arnhem battle, because we've done the bigger picture stuff last week with the whole broad strategy of what was Monty thinking, but the bravery of these individuals and the desperation, you've got it through absolutely amazingly. So you've been a superstar. So yeah, well, we're bringing things in, George. Yeah, I can't wait to see you again. We have waves or something. We'll do that. Yeah. I'm over in London in December. I might hit up with Al Murray. Then I'm over to see a concert in London, so maybe we can hit up. But fantastic stuff. If people have got anyone watching this has got any clues about that period, that Suez period, they can obviously get in touch with you via social media with fat diaries. I think you're at the gathering of information stage right now. Yes.
Yes.
So there you heard it there, folks. So anyone who's got any kind of vague connection to the British Army, Paratroop Regiment, the Operation Musketeer, Suez Crisis, 1956, get in touch with me and I'll put you in touch with George. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Folks, I will see you all again tomorrow. But meantime, this is Paul Woodadge for World War II TV saying enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Cheers, everybody. Bye.